David Bowie is an artist that is hard to define. He would consistently change his look and music, scratching his name into the book of music greats. Born David Robert Jones on the 8th of January 1947 in Brixton to a mother who worked as a waitress and a father who was a promotions officer for a charity. David demonstrated his musical ability early as he was able to play the recorder. David would be introduced to the music of rock and roll when his father brought home some American records that included the likes of Elvis Presley and Little Richard. David would take up playing skiffle with friends using a ukulele and a tea-chest bass. David would take up studies in music and art and design during his early years. David would obtain a serious injury whilst at school when he and a school friend had a fight over a girl. The friend would punch David in the eye, which would cause a permanently diluted eye. David would begin being a member of many bands that would not really go anywhere, and early recordings were unsuccessful. David did not want to be confused with the Monkees member Davy Jones, and therefore changed his name to David Bowie, inspired by the Pioneer and the knife, which made him famous. Bowie wrote songs for other artists such as Billy Fury. Frustrated over his lack of success, Bowie would write the song Space Oddity. The song was released 5 days before the Apollo 11 space expedition was to take place. It would reach number 5 on the chart. Though the album the single was taken from was unremarkable except for the single track. Bowie's next success was Hunky Dory, which was released in 1971. The album would display David moving toward a more pop and somewhat experimental direction. The album would reach 17 on the UK charts. David's next album would see him launched into a whole new stratosphere with the release of The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. It reached number 5 on the UK chart. The album was a critical success and is regarded as one of the best albums ever made. Diamond Dogs would be David Bowie's next album release and would see him furthering the sounds of Spiders from Mars. David narrates at the start of the album, describing a dilapidated land which was inspired by George Orwell's 1984. 1975 would see David reinvent himself with the album Young Americans, which would see David write songs with the funk and soul as inspirations. He would name this style as Plastic Soul and introduce the character of the Thin White Duke, who is mentioned in the opening song. Bowie was in a bad way emotionally during this time as he was participating in substance abuse. Bowie would relocate to Berlin, where he would write the album Low, which was released in 1977 and would reach number 2 in the UK chart. As inferred by the album's title, the album would see a solemn Bowie. Heroes, released in 1977, would have a similar sentiment and sound. Heroes would be released and would reach number 3 in the UK charts. Lodger would be released in 1979 and would complete what would come to be known as the Berlin Trilogy. It strayed away slightly from its predecessors and would receive some negative reviews upon release and would reach number 4 on the UK chart. David would release more albums such as Super Creeps and would reach his peak with the song Under Pressure and with the album Let's Dance, which reaching number 1 in the UK and 4 on the American Billboard. Bowie would perform in the film Labyrinth, The Man Who Fell to Earth, among others, and he would see varying levels of success over the coming years, becoming a musical idol and influence to so many musicians. On the 10th of January 2016, David died from liver cancer. He had been diagnosed 18 months earlier, but had decided to keep the diagnosis private. He was 69 years old. Singer, songwriter, musician, actor. David Bowie was all of these things, and he would use these abilities to create a unique legacy that will never be forgotten.